So to say, this is what I see, this is how I feel, and this is what I need. And I'm open to hearing what you need back from me, but I'm not open to things not changing, right? So you have that conversation.
Hi, I'm Veronica Cisneros, licensed marriage and family therapist, entrepreneur, and host of the Empowered and Unapologetic podcast. I was 1 month away from divorce. The court papers were filed. We had just had our first daughter, and I felt more alone than ever. My husband told me he was tired of competing with my career. I was overwhelmed, disconnected from my family, and questioning everything I had built. I didn't want to lose my marriage, but I also didn't want to keep losing myself. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I stopped pointing fingers and started doing the work on me. Now, after 25 plus years of marriage, raising 3 daughters, and running a thriving therapy practice, I'm here to help you do the same. This podcast is for the woman who looks like she has it all together, but secretly feels like she's falling apart. We're talking real marriage struggles, parenting teens, rebuilding trust, reclaiming identity, and finally feeling like you again. Pull up a seat. You don't have to figure it out alone. This is Empowered and Unapologetic. Today's guest is someone who has spent her entire career helping women stop abandoning themselves in their relationships and start using their voice without apologizing for it. Tonya Lester, licensed clinical social worker, is the author of Pushback: Live, Love, and Work with Others Without Losing Yourself, and her upcoming work teaches women the radical truth that inspired today's episode. It's okay to be difficult. It's okay to have needs. It's okay to ask for more. Tonya is a Brooklyn-based psychotherapist and writer whose work on relationships and communication has been featured everywhere. The New York Times, Modern Love Column, The Guardian, Newsweek, Well and Good, HuffPo, Fatherly, and more. She's also the voice behind the hit Psychology Today column, Staying Sane Inside Insanity, where she helps people navigate relationships that feel, well, hard. But what makes Tonya the perfect person for this episode is her raw honesty about relationships, including her own. She knows what happens inside marriages where women hold everything together until they quietly fall apart. And today, she's here to teach us 3 powerful truths: why it's actually okay and necessary to be difficult, how to ask for what you need in your relationship without guilt, fear, or sounding like a nag, and 3, how to know when you should keep pushing back and when it might be time to leave. If you're a woman who feels like you're walking on eggshells or constantly trying to be easy, low maintenance, or the one who doesn't ask for too much, this episode is for you. Tonya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Veronica. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So let's get straight to it. The core message of your work: it's okay to be difficult. Why do so many women, especially successful, driven women, believe they have to be easy, flexible, and endlessly accommodating to keep the peace?
Because we've been socialized that way, right? Because that is the culture. Because there's an idea that if someone has to be disappointed, if someone has to suck it up, if someone has to bury their own needs in any given situation, be the shock absorber is what I call it, it's always the woman in the room, whether it's the bedroom or the boardroom. And so what I see over and over again is women saying, I have something to say. I want to speak up, but I'm afraid people won't like me, that they're going to find me aggressive. And it's true. Sometimes they do. And so then it's on us to say, you know what? Harmony for its own sake is a trap. And I'm going to speak up anyways. And I'm going to lean into healthy conflict in order to create a world and a life that I want.
And that's so hard to do, especially since it more than likely hasn't been modeled for us. The women,
100%,
right? The women in my audience are running careers, homes, schedules, emotions, everything. And yet when it comes to asking for what they need, they completely freeze. Why is asking for help or support so emotionally loaded for high achieving women specifically?
I think when you're very high achieving, there's an idea that I'm going to have to do it all myself. No one is here to help me. And so what ends up is we keep adding, the expectations get higher,
Yeah.
higher, higher. And what I've had very high achieving women say to me all the time is, I don't want to appear needy. I don't want to appear weak. And I don't want to appear demanding.
Yeah.
Well, if making a request makes you weak, needy, and demanding, then of course you're trapped, right? You can't speak up and you can't ask for what you need. And I think when women are very successful, usually it's because at least part of them is very, very self reliant, which is amazing. But everybody taps out, right? You have more and more and more pressure, especially if you're talking about very successful work life, very successful home life. Eventually everyone breaks and we all need help. And sometimes we just have to admit that I need to assert my own needs because no one is stepping in to help me unless I do that.
Yes. For the mom listening who said being she's difficult, her husband calls her a nag, and her kids feel like she's the one that's causing the arguments, even though she's just trying to no longer be accountable for things, what would you say to her?
When we start speaking up and we start asking for something different from the people around us, it is natural to assume that they're going to push back. Like one thing I found really lacking in a lot of this sort of self help relationship literature is there was this idea, all these books are aimed at women, and there's an idea that, oh, but if you just speak up, everyone will fall in line. If you just push back, it will be easy. And your husband is dying for you to ask for more, and your kids want to be held to a higher standard. No, 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 no. Usually the relationships that are working or that are the most painful for us are working just fine for someone else. Like we have to remember that. So we have to make it more painful for painful is the wrong word, but to make it harder for other people to ignore our needs.
Yeah.
And so the word nagging really makes my head explode because nagging implies that it's not already been communicated that something is his
Yeah.
responsibility, right? So the only reason you have to nag is because you've set expectations and he's not stepping up.
Yep.
And so why are you the bad guy now with nagging when in any other work environment, I'm sure at his job, when he's asked to do something and he doesn't and someone calls him out, he probably doesn't say he's being nagged by his male boss, right? It's probably like, no, I fell down on the job, we set expectations and I didn't follow through.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is that we insist on that type of reciprocity and collaboration in our personal lives. And we can do that by having hard talks and setting expectations ahead of time and getting, if someone is ignoring you, if you keep asking for a change, and especially a spouse is ignoring you, you're going to have to lean into the conflict. You're
Yeah.
going to have to say, this is not working for me anymore. I am not happy. This has to change. We need to go to marriage counseling. You're not doing your share. This is too hard on me. And if you're married to someone who doesn't care that you're unhappy or suffering, you need to look very hard at your marriage to decide whether you want to stay or not.
How can she start practicing being difficult in a way that feels safe and manageable? Can you provide us like step by steps?
Yeah. So I like to say that this is an old like social work adage, strike while the iron is cold, so don't have a serious talk around setting expectations when you're already elevated, already angry. Have a calm moment, set the stage, and saying something like, we need to talk is perfectly fine. You could also say, I'm feeling really worn down and I want to adjust our expectations of each other and I want to have a really serious talk about it. So you've set the stage, you've created a calm environment. Turn off your phones, don't have interruptions, really talk and bring an energy to it that your partner will know that you are serious. So this has been bothering me for a long time. This is hard to say. And so I'm sure it's hard to hear. I am deeply, deeply unhappy. So one thing I think a lot of women do is soft pedal and sugarcoat.
Yeah.
Like, if you could just do this, if you could just do this. If that's true, fine, say it that way. If you're complaining every weekend to your girlfriends about how your husband is driving you crazy, if you're telling your mom you're thinking about leaving, he should have that information, right?
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we don't share that with the person who needs to hear it. So you say it clearly, and we can be concise, we can be clear, and we can be kind without being like dishonest or that soft pedaling I was talking about. So to say, this is what I see, this is how I feel, and this is what I need.
Yep.
And I'm open to hearing what you need back from me, but I'm not open to things not changing, right? So you have that conversation, you set the expectations, and then you need to follow up. And if you have this conversation and it's like, yeah, or he's really in it at the time, and this is a big complaint sometimes people will have about couples therapy, he's saying all the right things in the session, and then we get home and everything slides right back. Okay, then you have to be mad. Then you have to say, this is unacceptable to me. This is so hurtful that we've talked about this and you promised, and now you're not doing it. Like, come on. So we have to amplify sometimes if we're being ignored or not being heard. And I really do I believe in coupledom. I believe in partnership. And I believe that in most cases, our partners want us to be happy. In most cases, what we're asking them to do will be worth it to them to make the shift. And then if it's not, we're getting to the third piece of whether you stay or go. And that's a bigger discussion. But what I see often is that we're not really giving him a chance by being super, super clear. And that's not always the case. Sometimes people really disappoint us, but first, be strong, be clear, and say exactly what you need.
So for the woman who is strong and clear and has said these things, but nothing's changed at all, or it changes for 5 seconds and then it reverts back, what would you say to her?
He has to know that you're ready to leave. And I know that is a hard thing to hear. And I think people say, oh, but ultimatums are so bad. Ultimatums are bad if you're dragging your partner to an unwanted future. So an ultimatum around like where you move or having another baby, if that's not what he wants, that's terrible. And what that means is that you're incompatible and probably you either have to decide whether it's worth it for you to stay or find another partner. But it's not an ultimatum to say, I'm sharing what I need and you are rejecting what I need. So I want to like lay bare that I have asked you for A, B, and C, and you are not holding up your end of the bargain.
Yeah.
I need to be with someone who is ready and willing to collaborate with me and wants to give as much to this relationship as they're receiving as I'm putting in. And if he doesn't respond to that, if he is just like a bump on a log, then you really need to reevaluate whether you want what is probably becoming a parent-child relationship.
Yep.
Because he's not able to partner with you. And I know people don't want to hear that. And I think this is some of the messaging we get as women is that it's our job to make relationships work no matter what.
Yeah.
And that our elbow grease and our hard work and hard loving attention should be enough to make a marriage survive and thrive. And that is simply not true.
Yeah.
We're also working, we're raising the kids.
Amen.
We need a partner. We don't need another kid.
What are the signs a woman has been unclear or self-silencing in her relationship without even realizing it?
I think we have to look very carefully at what we say to other people. If you're complaining to your therapist every week or you're talking to your friend and you realize that you're saying things to them that you've never said to your husband, you probably have a very hard conversation in front of you. So that's one sign. The other thing is I think an underlying resentment, like when you feel like you're kind of seething or you kind of go off because of something small the kids did, like you're overreacting to the wrong things. I think that then that's a good time to check in. Am I really saying the hard things to the person who needs to hear it? Am I talking and confiding and getting emotional support from everyone but my partner? Am I overreacting to small things? And do I feel an underlying heavy resentment that I just don't like? And this isn't who I really am. And I feel so bogged down.
Gotcha. Nothing breaks my heart more than watching women pour into everyone else and feel like they've completely lost themselves in the process. That's why I have founded Outside the Norm Counseling, because therapy shouldn't feel like one more thing on your to-do list. It should feel like relief. I'm Veronica Cisneros, licensed marriage and family therapist and host of the Empowered and Unapologetic podcast. And I know what it's like to look around at your life and think, why does everything feel fine, but feel so off? At Outside the Norm Counseling, we help women who are high functioning on the outside, but silently falling apart inside. Women who are waking up overwhelmed, snapping at the people they love, and carrying guilt that never seems to lift. And if you're not ready for therapy, that's okay. Let's start small. With my self-paced course, Reignite Your Marriage and Reclaim Your Identity. This is for you, not your husband. Because when you reconnect with yourself, everything else begins to shift. Head to OutsideTheNormCounseling.com to start. Remember, you don't have to keep holding it all together. You just have to take the first step. Let's talk about resentment. So many women tell me they don't ask for anything because it won't matter, or he won't change, or I don't want to start a fight. How does self-silencing breed resentment, and how does resentment quietly kill a relationship?
Yeah. So when we're feeling resentful, we can take that as a sign that like a boundary has been crossed, a need isn't being met. And
Yep.
if we feel like we have communicated that and our partner is asking us to accept a life, a relationship, a partner who is not meeting us where we are, you're either going to turn that resentment in towards yourself and probably get depressed, or you're going to turn it towards the world and become very, very angry. And what I see is sometimes hard is I think that anger doesn't come out at the person you're actually angry at. It comes out at in different ways of like screaming at someone in traffic or whatever, as opposed to like, no, I have this partner who is not doing what he says he's going to do. And I'm so furious about that. It's a relationship killer because the only choice you have then is to go silent and just kind of eat your needs.
Yeah.
So how that has to come out, right? Feelings are like water, right? They will always rise to the surface. So you're going to find either you're being passive aggressive, maybe you're being kind of sneaky about spending or that type of thing. This is when people have affairs, right? They build
Yeah.
such a case against their partner in their mind and they think I have emotional needs that are not being met in this relationship, so I have to find them elsewhere. So either the relationship is dying because you're staying quiet and silenced and seething, or you're maybe doing something that is really extreme and you're kind of throwing a hand grenade in your relationship to destroy it. And
Yeah.
then often then you've destroyed your relationship and then you have all this guilt about that, whereas if it had been dealt with in a healthier way earlier, you might be able to emerge feeling a little more intact.
Yeah, I agree. One of your main teachings is helping people ask for what they really need. What's the first step for a woman who doesn't even know what she needs anymore? How can she rediscover her clarity?
I love that question. I love to really think about values and going really deep into what we really care about, right? There can be a lot of negotiation and flexibility about that kind of B level thing that aren't the A game number ones, but we need to be really clear on non-negotiables and really clear on what we believe and what we value. And so I always encourage women to kind of, I have a whole section in the book on values and a values exercise and just getting really clear on what's important to me. And if you can identify that first, it's much easier to speak up about the things that are important and let go the things that are less important to you. Something I always like to flag for people is if you really have no idea what you want, if you're really just lost, you want to get curious about why that is, because sometimes I think we as women will kind of make ourselves fuzzy about what our values are or what we want, because if we confront the truth about what we want, we're going to have to change our lives very dramatically in a way that we're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
So sometimes not knowing is almost, it's like it's self-sabotage, but also weirdly self-serving, right? It sometimes can allow us to avoid conflict, right? As opposed to being like, no, what I really want is another baby. What I really want is to go back to work. What I really want is to live in Europe for a year. Like if you really want that, sometimes that's going to be so disruptive to the system of your family that we silence it for that reason. And look, I'm an adult, like we're adults. You don't get everything you want in life, but you need to be clear about your yearning so that then you can share it.
A big fear women have is if I ask for what I need, my partner will get defensive. What's the right way to approach these conversations so they don't instantly turn into conflict?
This is such a hard one, and defensiveness is kind of the number one thing I work with clients on in a couple session. We all will get defensive. Like being defensive when someone is saying you did something wrong or saying they're not happy with you is that is just absolute human nature. So one thing I encourage when we're doing these conversations that I mentioned earlier about where we're going to kind of set the stage and say we're having a hard conversation is it's a great idea if both people can take a minute to say, I'm going to really try to listen. I'm just going to repeat back what I hear. I'm going to say what they need. And if I can't think of a response, or if I feel flooded with this feeling of defensiveness or self righteousness, I'm going to take a deep breath and maybe even do a timeout on the conversation. I think the best way to combat emotions just getting too high where the conversation gets away from you is to slow it
Hmm.
down. And so you can set an intention at the beginning of the conversation saying, this is going to be a hard conversation. I have a feeling that some of the stuff is going to bring up defensiveness. And I have a feeling that whatever, however you respond might bring up defensiveness in me. So I'm hoping we can take a minute to really try not to be defensive, like let that first wave of emotion kind of crash over you and don't respond, which of course this is high
Yeah.
level emotional maturity skills, and then respond, this is what I'm hearing. And then let it breathe, right? Some of the biggest issues in our life, there's not one conversation, it's many smaller conversations, right? So you can say, okay, this is what I heard. This is how you're feeling. This is what you need. Let's revisit this in 24 hours and kind of see where we are, because a lot of times the first thing that we blurt out isn't really even how we
Yeah.
feel, and that sometimes a little time and a little breathing room can help us get past that defensiveness. But if you're with someone who's very defensive and who cannot let it crash over, that's really when I do recommend bringing in a couples therapist at that point, because having a third person in the room can sometimes like put the temperature
Hmm.
down, and they might be able to hear you're being defensive from a therapist as opposed from the
Hmm.
partner.
What's one simple sentence, stem, or script a woman can use tonight to communicate a need without apologizing for it?
Simply, I need to talk to you about something serious. Here's how I'm feeling, and here's what I need from you. And if there's a barrier to you providing that to me, then I want us to discuss it to work it out. But I'm very serious. Maybe even this is actually a non
Mhm.
negotiable for me. And so we need to figure it out. And you can add, I love you. And I would not be bringing this to you if I wasn't trying to be closer and make our relationship deeper. If I didn't love you so much, I wouldn't be risking this hard
Yeah.
conversation. So I want you to see this for what it is, which is an investment in our relationship.
I love that. I love that. Let's talk about boundaries. A lot of women think boundaries mean confrontation. What are the subtle, non combative ways to set boundaries that still honor your emotional needs?
One thing I worry a little bit is sometimes being emotional is good, right? Emotion, it gives fuel and context, and it gives like heft to what we're saying. So I being combative is being attacking, whereas I think holding a boundary sometimes does require emotion, depending on how hard someone is pushing against your boundary. So again, I think the simplest thing is the best. If you have someone, we have the holidays coming up, and so people are dealing with family of origin and that type of thing. And we can keep a boundary really by stating the boundary in a in a just kind of a flat way, and then saying the same boundary over and over and over again. And if there's some people in our lives, or maybe our mother or something, that we're not going to cut them off, but we might have to say I mean, maybe you are, but we might have to say the boundary a
Yeah.
hundred times. I might have to say over and over again, yeah, you can't bring the dogs to stay at my house, like it's too disruptive with my toddler. No. And then again, well, it'll be hard to find out. Nope. Sorry. No, 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 no. Like, so and that will sound combative actually to some people, but that's sort of not
No.
your problem. If you are not name calling, if you are not yelling, if you are not using like a disdainful tone, you can say a boundary clearly and over, and they might say you're being difficult. They might say you're being combative, but you're not, right? Like they have to deal with their emotions, and but you can set boundaries around your time and your
I
space.
love that. And that's so true. I think a lot of people struggle with boundaries because they feel like nobody will respect them. But the only time people don't respect your boundaries is when you don't respect them. As long as you assert
That's right.
yourself, as long as you maintain your non negotiables and you make that clear, nobody can cross it unless you allow it. I love that. You talk a lot
Right.
about pushing back. How does a woman know when she should keep pushing back and when her relationship might actually be at a crossroads?
So we want to be in a relationship with someone who wants to collaborate with us and who values reciprocity. The ideal situation is the more I put in my relationship, the more I get back from my partner and the more they give me. But not everyone's like that, right? We have people who are givers and people who are
Yeah.
takers. And we need to make sure we're with someone who values us enough to want to keep growing together and want to invest in the relationship. It's an absolute truth that in our society, women are taught how to nurture relationships, and men just don't get that education in the same way. And so when we talk about like the male loneliness epidemic and that type of thing, I really think it's because men have been
Yeah.
shortchanged on learning how to value their relationships. And so often it's like a marriage or partnership is the first time they're being asked to really invest in a relationship. But if you have a partner who wants to work with you, right? They don't have to be perfect. They just have to want to like be in the game, and they have to care enough about you that your happiness is as important to them as theirs, and vice versa. I say this all the time. My husband's happiness is not more important to me than
Yeah.
mine, but it is as important. It's as important. And he feels the same way. Well, there's a lot of room for growth and flexibility in a relationship where both partners feel that way. So I would say if you have a partner who understands your values, wants to work with you, your happiness is as important to them as theirs, the sky's the
Yeah.
limit. If you are with somebody who doesn't believe they need to invest in the relationship, who doesn't care about your values, who believes their happiness is much more important than yours, you're just going to keep banging your head against the wall. And we deserve to be valued, and it is better to be single and have a lot of other love in our life with friends and family and whatnot and other people who value us than to be banging our head against a wall constantly with someone who will not invest
Yeah.
in the relationship in the way that we are.
Yeah. I agree. It's less stressful too, right?
So I mean, I always think of when my sister got divorced, and she absolutely needed to get divorced, and she would walk into her house and it was like a calm, warm house, like full of love, and no one was mad. Everyone was happy to see you. And just that change, life
Mhm.
changing, right? I always want to walk into a warm, loving house. And so if there's someone who is blocking that, maybe they need to be plucked out.
What would
So,
you say is one challenge you faced in your relationship while growing your career? And what did you have to push back on to maintain your voice?
so my husband was much farther in his career than I was in mine when we were first together, and then we had young children, and I took the absolute lead on family and home life. And so it wasn't until between our we have two kids, two children, that we went to school, and that I went to school and became a therapist after that. So we went from me totally being in the backseat, very supportive of his career. His career took precedent over everything. I just would handle anything. There wasn't need for a lot of negotiation or compromise on his part, to then building my own career and needing much more time, much more help from him in order to create the kind of practice that I wanted. And of course, there were growing pains. I mean, he had never had to do this before. And so suddenly it was like, nope, you're going to have to be the one to take the kid to the dentist because I have clients all day, or I have this interview now, and so I need you to be home an hour earlier than you usually would to make dinner. And it caused growing pains. We fell into this trap, which I think so
Yeah.
many couples do, where you end up arguing about whose day is more
Yeah.
stressful and important. And that's a terrible position
Yeah.
to be in as a partner, because you want to be on the same team, facing these obstacles from the world together. And that was an absolute challenge for us and an absolute growing pains, but it was because he is someone who wants to be flexible. He had to have a major mind shift about considering my career as important as his, but he did, many fights later and many like, no, this is important too. This is my business. Like I'm building this for us. And I care about being successful. I'm ambitious too. It took a lot of conversations like that, but I'm lucky to have a true partner. So he met that, but it wasn't easy. It took like 2 years to totally get over that hump. Lots
of big uncomfortable conversations that needed to be had. Tanya, this was incredibly powerful. Before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can find you, how they can work with you, and if you have any freebies or resources you want them to grab?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram, Tonya Lester Psychotherapy. My book is Push Back, Live, Love, and Work with Others Without Losing Yourself. You can buy it at Amazon or any bookstore. It's everywhere, happily. And on my website, I have a values exercise, a quiz on there. I have some journal prompts, and you can always also read my blog, Staying Sane Inside Insanity, which is on Psychology Today. So I'd love to see people on Instagram or on my website.
Thank you so much for being on the show and for all of your valuable information.
Thank you so much for having me, Veronica. I really appreciate it.
Raise your hand if you are ready to level up your marriage for 2023. Do you find that you're spending your time together with your husband checked out and in front of the TV? I know you're ready for tangible strategies that actually get you results. Reignite the spark in your marriage, have fun, and grow together. Well, I hope you have your hand raised at this minute because I have something special for you. I'm introducing my brand new 6-question marriage predictor quiz that's gonna give you personalized results to catapult you into the next stage of your marriage journey. That means you'll receive the results to where your marriage can get the best help. If you've got just 1 minute, head to veronicacisneros.org/quiz. Again, that's veronicacisneros.org/quiz. And you can take my brand new quiz, Marriage Predictor. Get your results delivered right to your email address. Again, that's veronicacisneros.org/quiz. veronicacisneros.org/quiz. What's up, ladies? Just want to let you guys know that your ratings and reviews for this podcast are greatly appreciated. If you love this podcast, please go to iTunes right now, write a review, rate the episode, and subscribe. Don't forget to share it with your friends.